my name is Sam and thanks for checking out this video. I hope you are having a wonderful Christmas Eve and I hope you have an even better Christmas tomorrow if you do celebrate it. I hope you just enjoy whatever you are celebrating this season and make sure you're safe for the rest of the season. Honestly, be safe year round, but make sure you're extra safe, especially in Canada with the snow. So this week to be fair, I was a little sick, but I didn't have to go to work at all this week, so I literally just got to read all week, which was pretty amazing. So I ended up reading 10 books this week. I actually really enjoyed all of them. I think the lowest rating I gave was like a 3 stars, and even then it was okay, it just wasn't amazing. So I'm actually really happy with that. So the first book that I read this week was The Dyer King by William Ritter. This is the 4th book in the Jacoby series, and I'm officially done it as well as the Jacoby series now, which I'm kind of disappointed by. I love this series, and I'm so sad it's over. I can't really summarize it without giving spoilers for book 1, 2, or 3, but it's just kind of a continuation that there's a main evil villain king, and there's a little bit like fairy and realm hopping and everything. And there's Jacoby, who is kind of like the Sherlock Holmes characters. And then there's Abigail, who is kind of going against the grain of what society expected of women at the time period and kind of making a name for herself along with Jacoby, who has some supernatural powers. They also live in a house where there is a ghost named Jenny, which has a little bit of a romance going on now since everything that happened in book 3 happened. I actually really enjoyed this book. It was structured a little bit differently than the rest of the series though, which kind of like threw me off. I kept waiting for things to change. In the rest of the series, there is normally like an introduction, and they're like kind of thrown into the supernatural world of whatever the problem is, and then they have that chance to come back and regroup at the headquarters, which is their house, and then they kind of like pull in other supernatural people to get help. But in this one, it just like straight to the problem, which, I mean, it made sense. It was just very odd to me. It was just, I wasn't expecting it. Honestly, I really enjoyed how strong a lot of the female characters were in this book, especially with the time period setting. And Jacoby is such a supporter of that, but he's also so, honestly, Jacoby reminds me a lot of Dirk Gently from Dirk Gently's Detective Agency, the TV show. I've never read the books. It was just really nice and refreshing, but like they did it so stealthily that like you kind of just at the end you're like, oh wow, Jacoby's like an awesome human being, and like I want the best for him because he supports all of these women, and despite the time period. I love the little rebellious aspect that they have too of going against like the local police, or like they have this really easy ability to like pinpoint who the evil person is in the town and find a way to work around them in both petty ways as well as in like ways to solve the overall problem. So overall, I gave this book a 5 out of 5, and I'm definitely going to reread this series again. It's a really good series, I think, for me especially to read if I feel like a book reading slump coming on. I would just really highly recommend this series. I'm not a big massive reader when it comes to mysteries or anything like that. There's a lot of historical fiction aspects of this. There's supernatural and paranormal, but it's honestly just really fun, and it doesn't take itself super seriously. It's just really fun overall read, and I'm going to keep an eye on William Ritter. I hope he writes some more stuff, and hopefully I can pick that up. The second book that I read this week was Traitor Angels by M. Blankman. This is a standalone historical fiction, and it's actually quite an interesting concept. Elizabeth, the main character, is the daughter of John Milton, who, after all of like the revolutions and government flip-flopping at the time period, is kind of blacklisted when there is a king put back on the throne, Charles II. And at this point in his life, he's actually gone blind while he's writing Paradise Lost, and he is saying it out loud, and then one of his daughters, Elizabeth, is writing it down. And because John Milton knew some special people, he was able to not be executed or have to flee the country, but able to live in kind of quiet seclusion in, the middle of nowhere in England. All of this changes, though, when an Italian gentleman is sent by his master to the Miltons, and all of a sudden King's guards and such show up, and John and his family are taken to the capital because they think he's trying to conspire. And Elizabeth pretends to be a servant, so she isn't taken with them, and she and the Italian, who her father has essentially like manipulated it over 20 or 30 years, are going to work together, and they use his past poems, but majority of the content comes from Paradise Lost while it's being written. They use his literature to find clues as to where he's hidden information, and essentially there's like an immortal elixir that is found. There was a lot more talk and evaluation of religion and science in this, which I absolutely love, and I think we don't do enough of that in society. It's different society nowadays than it was back then, but they come from, one is Protestant, one is Roman Catholic, I think it is in here. Yeah, they come from 2 different denominations of Christianity, so there is that kind of confliction and they evaluate each other. But there is also a lot of talk of like, but if there's an elixir to life that is on the earth, does this negate the entire premise of Catholicism? Because then Jesus wouldn't be quite as, special or miraculous, kind of walking from the dead kind of thing. And I found that super, super interesting. Could have probably done without the romance in it. I don't really think it added anything to it. They could have just been good friends because they were going through a lot together to begin with. So I wasn't crazy about that part. Overall, I gave the book a 4 out of 5 stars. It was not as good as Prisoner of Night in a Fog, but I found it a really interesting historical fiction. I think I've read some books kind of like this before, but I don't think I enjoyed them quite as much. There's betrayal, and there's a lot of like family goals. Like she's going through so much to try and save her father, who himself is at a disability already of not being able to see anything during like the Tudor era, basically. And I mean, he's also living in a time where, there's a monarch when he adamantly spoke out against having monarchs. And I don't know, I just find it really interesting and bringing up the premise even this long ago of, having religion and state as separate entities. And you look at, we battle that, especially right now in certain countries where they do technically have a separation of church and state. But if you look at policies and politicians, they really don't. And there's this big push right now of like, well, you should bring them together, whereas I live in a country where, it's actually not popular for politicians to bring up their religion when they're talking about politics because they should be separate entities. So, I mean, like, it's really kind of funny that we look back and, like, we're having this discussion nowadays, even though we talked about this, and it was, like, a controversial topic to bring up, 500-600 years ago. Yeah, it was just really interesting. I would recommend this one. The third book that I read this week was Renegades by Marissa Meyer. This book is kind of hard to describe, but in all honesty, you could kind of get the gist of it from like the prequel. There's like 4 pages or something like that, I think it is. It just explains what's happened to the world. There was essentially like several like governments attempted and then like things go to hell in a handbasket pretty quickly. But at this point, there are types of people that develop specific powers and they can join the Renegades, who at this time are considered like kind of the government and police, even though there's some good ones and there's some bad ones, and they seem to be struggling long-term wise. But there is a group of rebels who have some of these powers but don't want to join the Renegades. In an attempt to bring down the Renegades and kind of infiltrate them, they have someone go undercover, and that is where this goes. And there is a slow burning romance. The betrayal is coming, but it doesn't actually happen in here. It's just like, it's such a long drawn out game, but it's not like nothing happens between everything, it's just really, really cool. I really enjoyed getting to see all of the different powers that people have. It was really creative. I thought the idea of being able to like never have to sleep, like, man, I could get so much done in life if that was my power. The evaluation and like picking of team process is really cool. So you can volunteer to be evaluated. You can show off your powers. And then Renegades teams can decide if they want to pick you or not. And if you do get picked by a team, another team can like challenge it, and then you have to duel. And you see that happen in this book. So it's kind of like a battle royale kind of thing. It was just really, really cool. I wish they had like had more scenes like that, because that would have been like, or just do a whole book like that. That should have been really cool. But overall, I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 5 out of 5. The fourth book that I read this week was The Wizards of Once by Cressida Cowell. I actually followed along to the audiobook for this because I found out the audiobook was read by David Tennant. Absolutely love David Tennant, and he does a really good job on audiobooks. I would very highly recommend that. I would also, though, recommend just getting the physical book because there's some amazing illustrations in here. It honestly looks like what my elementary school notebooks would look like, with like little doodles on the inside. So essentially there are kind of 2, I don't even know if warring is the right ones, but there's a kingdom of like magic and then non-magic. Because of their 2 children, they all of a sudden interact, and there is like a kidnapping and, a sword, and like there is a lot of moral lessons that in particularly one character learns about, but as well as you just see the characters grow an awful lot. And I'm really curious to see where the sequel is going to go, because the parents were kind of brought up, and the parents even learn lessons in this. Honestly, the illustrations in here just like brought the book to life. It was just so fun and cool. It really let you get a better sense of the characters and like the age, especially now being 25, because this is a middle grade book. It just got me down to that level. You're not totally sure who the narrator is, and I love that aspect of it. I also really love like just the random quirky magic things kind of thrown into it. There's a book that is over 1 million pages, and like it's just really, really fun read. So I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5. The fifth book that I read this week was The Last Neanderthal by Claire Cameron. This book alternates perspectives between a girl in present time in France and then a Neanderthal, I think it's like 60,000 years ago or something like that. Sorry, 40,000 years ago. They go through mirroring life events of, pregnancy and birth as women. The character in present time finds the remains of what we assume to be the last Neanderthal character in here. And yeah, it's just the whole story of the dig. I found the premise to be interesting, but overall I found the book actually quite boring. Nothing happened. And I mean, it's not super long, but I got to the end and I was like, oh, thank God, like it's over. The writing was fine, like the actual writing style was fine, and the perspectives swapping back and forth were okay, but nothing happened. You got to the end and there was no like justification of like, oh, I just read this book. That's it? Like, I'm nothing. I was kind of disappointed by that, unfortunately. So I think I gave this book a 2.5 out of 5 stars. The sixth book that I read this week was Black Hearts by Nicole Casterman. I think I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. It is the kind of prequel story. I don't even know if prequel is the right word, though. It is the story of how Blackbeard becomes Blackbeard, but he doesn't become the Blackbeard Captain Pirate that we know by the end of this book, but there is a sequel, so I'm going to read that soon, hopefully in January, and see that maybe that's where that goes. So this book takes place in England right after, during the colonies and everything like that. This is really interesting. You switch between the perspective of Teach, which is a white privileged male, and a girl named Anne, who is a maid in that household. And Teach has just come back from a year-long trip, I guess. He worked on a boat for a year. He convinced his dad to let him do it. His dad is a very controlling man who has the ambition and money. So he is trying to marry his son into title, having that money kind of to bargain, and he has found a family that has a title and is in need of money. So with that engagement going on, Teach has come back to kind of pick up, and he's supposed to get married soon. We find out that despite being a maid in the household, Anne is actually the illegitimate daughter of her father, who used to be a merchant, and a woman that he brought back from the Indies. Because of the different races, obviously, between the two and the time period, she is never claimed as legitimate, so her half-brother ends up getting a lot of things and being extremely manipulative and essentially like selling her off into be a maid because her mother has since died and now she has no other funds or way of supporting herself. Once it got going, it was good. I did have an issue at the beginning, though, that Teach is not a nice person in the first several chapters, and then all of a sudden his personality changes. I think I know what she was trying to do as an author, but she didn't do it as slow enough or to have those moments where he figures things out. He's just honestly a total douchebag to Anne for the first several chapters, and then all of a sudden he changes and is like starts having romantic feelings about her. I could guess by about halfway through what exactly like the reveal was going to be at the end. I could just guess it as soon as like, oh, I can't even remember what the event was, but there was like a dinner party or something like that, one of the dinner parties. But I remember seeing like, I wonder if this is it. And then I got to the end and I was right. I wasn't 100% sure. I just had my thoughts and like, I think this is going to happen. And it did. So I was right, and I was actually really excited about that because I'm never right about that stuff. And I'm really excited to see what Black Souls has to offer. The seventh book that I read this week was The Fifth Season. And I don't even know what to make of this book. I think I enjoyed it, which I know sounds very weird. I don't even know how to summarize it. There's just like a dystopian world with powers and like, I'll link it in the description box down below and you can read the summary. I enjoyed it, I think, for the most part. I honestly didn't understand the majority of it. It could have been because I was reading it at the peak of my sickness this week. I don't know. I think I enjoyed it, and I definitely want to read the sequels, and I'm curious to see about the adaptation. The powers were really cool, and I liked the battle scenes. I remember that, but there was a lot of just, like, journeying places and, like, introducing to new places and different types of people. I don't know if they're species or races, and there's some geopolitics kind of going on, but, like, the seasons, different types of seasons, which I still don't understand, were just kind of thrown around. I don't think I totally understood that. But from the sounds of it, it wasn't enough. I didn't feel lost enough to deter me from reading it. I just felt lost enough that I was like, I'm not totally sure what's happening here, but it seems cool. I've heard from a lot of people that that's kind of normal and to just keep reading, and it kind of envelops as you go through the rest of the stories, which I think it was written well enough to justify doing that for sure. So I think I gave the book a 4 out of 5 stars. The 8th book that I read this week was The Magic Misfits by Neil Patrick Harris. This book was so cute. Again, it's a middle grade juvenile. There's some illustrations in here that are really, really cute. There is a boy named Carson who is an orphan. His parents, it's kind of vague. They either died or they're abandoned him to his uncle, whose uncle's not a great person. So to escape his uncle, because he doesn't want to be used as a pickpocketer, he runs away on a train and ends in an area where there's like kind of a carnival going on. At this location, he meets a gentleman who ends up being very helpful to him, kind of a father figure. And then he also meets the carnival that's going on in that area, and the people running the carnival are not nice, I guess is the easiest way to say it, at the juvenile grade. He also meets a band of other friends. I think the name of the gentleman who helped him is Mr. Vernon, and Mr. Vernon owns the local magic shop and kind of takes Carson in. Mr. Vernon and his husband, who is the cook at the local resort, have a daughter as well, who they have adopted, which kind of gives Carson like a little like in on the family. And you later find out that they have more connections than that. One of the main characters is also in a wheelchair as well. So there's just like a lot of diversity in this book overall. And it's done just very well. And it's just kind of like yeah, they have 2 dads. Yeah, this person's in a wheelchair. That doesn't mean that they can't do anything. And there's honestly the overall big moral lesson of this is like be good to other people and like kind of what goes around comes around, and don't steal from people, and like you have your morals and never sacrifice those. And even with those morals, Carson does not have an easy situation, and he's constantly challenged with, do you steal from someone or do you go hungry and homeless at night? I don't know that I would be able to make the decisions that he makes at his age in those situations. And he's such just a sweetheart of a person, and I think I gave this book a 4 or 5 out of 5 stars. The 9th book that I read this week was The Last and Sara by Kristen Cicerelli. So this takes place in a kingdom where there is, there's the old legends, and if you say the legends, then they're bad for you and they kill you, is kind of the concept. And the main character is the daughter of the king, and she is out hunting dragons for her father. She has been kind of accused as a young kid of bringing about a dragon attack the last time, and the result of it being that she's betrothed to someone who saved her, kind of to save face so that she doesn't get like executed at the demand of the people. There's a very like dark slave kind of hierarchy set up within here, and there's very strict, like slaves don't look at their masters, all that kind of stuff. And then there's a slave that kind of breaks apart from this, and things start to unravel very quickly, and there's magic powers, and there's a rebellion, and outsiders come in to help, and she is very quickly shown exactly what the world that she lives in is actually about, because she's been sheltered and a lot of stuff has been hidden from her with the purpose of trying to manipulate her, and chaos ensues. And yeah, it was really interesting. It's a very dark book, and like sometimes reading about the slave abuse and everything was really, really hard to swallow. But I mean, like, it's not like it's not a part of our history as well. So slavery is by no means defended in this book. It's pretty heavily criticized, and the whole point of the rebellion is to get rid of the slavery. And she grows a lot. The main character, like, she grows so much as a character when she's presented with information. She takes it and like evaluates it over and over and over again, until she figures things out and starts connecting dots. And, and then she goes for, well, this is wrong then. Why have I been doing this? I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars overall. It was really, really interesting. I really loved it. And I'm really excited for the sequel. And the cover is so pretty. And the last book that I read this week was Lost in a Book by Jennifer Donnelly. I think I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars. It just takes place during the Beauty and the Beast, like the Disney film, essentially between, the Beast giving her the library and then everything else going on after that. While cleaning the library, Belle finds a room and a book, and she gets sucked into the book. You kind of go through, it's kind of playing up, love and death have, like, the concepts are people, and they have a bet going on, and she gets drawn into the bet. There's a lot of bringing up of, like, Persephone and Hades, like the mythology. I thought the concept of it was good. The writing was fine. It's not an original book, though. I'm pretty sure I've read this plot in like a variety of other books. There's no need for it to be Beauty and the Beast. There's really no like beast in the actual like plot for the most part. I mean, it's just kind of an adventure of Belle, and I thought it was okay. Like, it's just not, it's good if you kind of separate it from the Beauty and the Beast franchise. I think my problem was that it says Disney's Beauty and the Beast, so it's relating to the film. Belle in this book is kind of stupid. When you think of the personality and the logic and the reasoning and the actions of Belle in the movie, this is not the same Belle. She's not like the Mean Girls or anything like that, but she's more materialistic, and she's a lot less trusting, and like there's just personality parts that were off, that they're not the same Belle, and that kind of kept coming up and up and up and up again. By the end, it's the same kind of character, but like it didn't really make any sense as to why the character was like this in the first place if you're going off of Disney's Beauty and the Beast, and it says it on the cover. Disney's Beauty and the Beast. So those are all the books that I read this week. Have you read any of these books? Did you love them? Did you hate them? What did you read this week? Make sure to check the description box down below for all of my social media. If you follow me, I will follow you back. And have a happy and safe Christmas and New Year's.